Welcome to a new episode of the OCOM Podcast, Modern Medical Education, where we gather experts to discuss various topics in modern medical education, with the focus of today's show being on technology and medical education. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Hasty. I'm the Dean and the Chief Academic Officer of OCOM, and we have two awesome guest hosts with us today. The first being Shazam Mohammed, OCOM founding director of IT. And by the way, people have asked me, is his name really Shazam? I have seen his driver's license. He really is Shazam. So welcome, Shazam.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. And, tell me a little bit about what's new at the exciting world of IT at OCOM.
Yeah, no, of course. So, before I jump into it, I people come into this building and they kind of see the finished product, the televisions, the technology in the classrooms. I just want to talk a little bit about all the time that we've spent, in the background. You and I were coming here for a year and a half, before the doors open for students. And, we were working on the infrastructure, security protocols, developing everything that, for the faculty, the staff, and students can use. They come in and they jump right in and get going. So, behind the scenes, before we even start about what's going on now, there was so much that we put in beforehand to make this place what it is today. And fast forward to that, we accepted our students, first class students, in August. And all the time and the effort that we put in, beforehand made for sort of a seamless process for them to acclimate to the technology, to learn everything that we have to offer them. And, from all the data that we've been collecting on student use and, their utilization of the stuff that we have for them, it's, been pretty great so far. And in addition to that, the state of technology at OCOM, this beautiful room that we have right here, this was a big part of it. The podcasting room, we added it. It was always in the scope, but we added it a little bit late because, I kind of pride myself in, meeting with vendors and hashing out the good ones versus the bad ones. And when I wanted to do this, I wanted to make sure it was done right. Right. So fast forward to probably May of this year, Edwin came on and joined us. And then we were talking about the podcast, the media room, and, we haven't met a good vendor yet. The vendors that I've met with, they've quoted us ridiculous amounts, just because we're in a medical institution, they think they can charge us. So Edwin, and he'll talk a little bit more about it, but he has a member of his church that did a lot of work for him. And their church, his name is Juan Montillo, and he's the owner of La Focus Films. Great young sort of entrepreneur. Him and his wife, they run the La Focus Films. They do photography, and as a side thing, they do the design podcast studios. So he came in and we kind of told him what the vision was for this place, how we want to utilize it. And he said, okay. I was a little bit, apprehensive at first, but I'm telling you, he came back. He worked with Edwin Edwin was the project manager on it. He came back within a couple of weeks, and the design, the layout, beautiful. And I'll tell you, when you walk into this room and you compare it to the notes that Juan gave us in that second meeting, it's pretty much to the T exactly how this podcast studio came out. Thoroughly impressed with them. And if anybody out there is looking to build a podcast studio, let me know, and I'll give you his contact info.
Excellent. We have a person, right?
we got a guy. Oh, we got a person, right?
Yeah. So anyway, well, thank you for that. And I appreciate what you said about behind the scenes. And I think that most people don't really realize what goes into planning a medical school and planning the IT. And I think that some people think, you just buy some laptops and
right,
give them out. And there's an old saying, if you see a turtle on top of a lamppost, it didn't get there by accident. Yeah. And and actually Shazam's going to kill me for saying this, but we have this what I call the Genius Bar, although I think that's probably that may be copyrighted somewhere. Yeah. But what do we call it? Tech bar? Yeah.
We call it the Savant Bar. Just kidding. Yeah, OCOM Tech.
Yeah, OCOM Tech. Yeah. I'll never forget the first time I brought Shazam to the space. Actually, it was 2 years ago. I think this month, right?
Yeah, it'll be 2 years exactly. I think next week.
Yeah, and we were still very early under hard hat construction and stuff. And we were
Still
looking
sand
at
on the floors. They didn't pour the the floors down yet, but yeah, very early.
yeah, and then Shazam came from Hofstra Law School, and like a lot of higher education places, the tech folks were usually down in the basement and stuff,
Right. Yeah.
and we wanted to have this beautiful place, and and maybe we can put this in B-roll or whatever, but we have this incredible space that overlooks the atrium that's all glass enclosed and has the Parsons table that folks can kind of go in and learn about new technology or get their device fixed or whatever, like you'd actually see in sort of an Apple store or something like that. And and that's how we see technology. I'll never forget Shazam saw his office for the first time after being in working in basements and dungeons for his entire career, and
Dungeons, caves.
I'll never forget. I asked what was so what do you think, Shazam?
Yeah, I mean, you had already hired me at that point, but I was like, you had me at the huge, enormous window in my office. Like I was sold right there.
Yeah.
You know what? And to bring that up, I mean, Hofstra University, it was great. I loved working there. But technology, the building was built however many 60 years ago. So technology was an afterthought. Now, when this place was designed, technology is at the forefront of everything we do here. And I'm glad, whoever's watching this podcast, if you have the experience to come to this building, you'll see that technology is literally the center of this building. Second floor, as soon as you walk up the main staircase, I think that's, again, to drive the importance of technology for the students and the faculty, and how we, actually teach students here.
Yeah. Modern medical education.
Modern medical education.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Edwin Gonzalez, who, is the
Superstar.
Superstar, one of the most beloved employees at OCOM. So Edwin Gonzalez, AV and IT technologist at OCOM. So how are things going for you, Edwin?
Hey, so hello everybody. This is me from the background. Behind all of the podcasts that we've made thus far has usually been me back here switching the cameras. And no, I love this space. This is my dojo. This is my baby, and I love being at OCOM. Growing up, I always wanted to be a part of the medical field in some way. But I never wanted to be a doctor, interesting enough. I always thought to myself, what is cooler than being a doctor? I thought maybe teaching a doctor, because doctors know it. Doctors know everything, you know what I mean? So for me to be able to support him and maybe teach him a thing or two, I was like, that would be a great, to me, that's even cooler than being a doctor myself. And then years later, I'm here teaching doctors how to set up a podcast, sit down, how to use a microphone to teach their class, how to use their devices, IT, So it's really full circle. It's a real big blessing to be here. And I really love it. And Shazam's my boss, and he's a great boss. I'm having a great time here.
Yeah, and by the way, before the show, Edwin apologized to me. He said, if Shazam tells any jokes, he has to laugh.
Hit the sound. Hit the sound for when I make a joke.
Yeah, I got you. Don't worry about it. Oh,
this is me making a joke.
That's fantastic.
Although actually, when I make a joke, Edwin plays that other sound. Yeah.
That's just a little bit of fun.
Yeah. And I really appreciate what you said, Edwin. And I feel the same way. The difference that we can make training the next generation of physicians, has such a multiplier effect, right? I mean, especially with the technology, training the physician of the future. What we can do here is going to have impact on patients for literally generations to come. Now, of course, the technology is going to continuously improve, and we're going to continue to innovate. But I think that by giving them the skills, the resources, the tools to do their job, I mean, I think we're going to train a very special physician, or we are training very special physicians here at OCOM. So I'm super excited about that. And of course, and I always brag about Edwin too, the podcast studio, which I guess we call it the media room or whatever, but, I always call it the podcast studio, but it's really, studio A and B. We have the podcast studio here, and then we have this kind of green screen area, which I've actually, done it before. It's a little bit like a weather person, doing the green screen with the weather. And it's pretty incredible. And, I have people that come through and they say, well, gee, how'd you even think about these things? Medical school needing a podcast studio, but we use it almost every day, right? I mean, in terms of, professors coming here, giving, lectures and things like that, or recording things, or we have um, and we're going to have another podcast show with Dr. Martin, more of a wellness focused show, and that was, to me, I think that's also one of the most exciting things about technology when it inspires people to do more and make a bigger impact on others. I think that when you're doing that, you're really fulfilling your philosophy and mission of technology, right?
Yeah, yeah, and to kind of backtrack a little bit, the school's opening at such a unique time that we're on the cusp of, the AI, AR, virtual reality. You know, uh, we're going to be continuously looking forward to bringing these new technologies into the school. And I think how we're set up, we're at a unique place to vet, test, and implement those very very fast. In addition to that, this media room, you know when we opened it up, we had an initial mindset of what it's going to be used for, but it's evolved even in the few months since we've opened, and we're continuously making changes. Like right now, we had just a standard studio monitor for giving presentations, but what we're going to do now is swap that out for a digital whiteboard that actually turns vertically and horizontally. So if anybody wants to come in, use it as a whiteboard to record their presentation, they can write it out as they talk. Or again, they can use it like how we have been using with having a presentation, a slide presentation in the background. We can do so many things with this space. And again, it's always changing and we're always acclimating to what people want to do.
Yeah, and when you were saying that, I was thinking about Dr. Putzer. We just entered a relationship with Dr. Putzer, who's an incredible MCAT tutor. I think he has like an average like 15-point improvement on the MCAT, and he actually, in some ways, is an important milestone in folks when they get ready for medical school and taking the MCAT. And in some ways, he actually retrains how folks learn. And he had traditionally always did things with the whiteboard. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do this in-person course. And he'd always had kind of a limitation on how he did the in-person course by how far away somebody could read physical whiteboard. But by having digital whiteboards, now we can capture it. We can actually put it on the screens and everything. And now in this studio, he's going to create an online MCAT review program that I think could transform how folks, study and prepare for the MCAT. And I think that's going to be a cool innovation, with OCOM here, using technology, leveraging technology, really to train, physicians of the future. And I think that'll have a huge impact. So not only the folks that prepare for their MCAT that decided to come to OCOM, but they're going to be going to medical schools all over the country and maybe the world, right? And so to me, I think that's an incredible use of technology.
Yeah.
So so grateful for the team. I'll tell you the other thing that I always hear back from is the fact that we're an all Apple school. And I think I know we have aspirations. Your vision's become the fourth, I think, Apple distinguished medical school in the country, or something like that. And of course, I always people, the first time people hear that, they say, "Well, it isn't expensive," and then I refer folks back to the IBM study that you actually save $543 per FTE per year, and that includes hardware, software, and IT support. And of course, I know right now with your team, we launched a medical school with a total FTE count for IT of 4 FTEs. And I know that schools that are in a traditional Microsoft environment, they have like 8 FTEs or whatever, right? So,
Right. Yeah. There's a lot more background work that needs to be done. The problem with the initial, it's cost. That's why a lot of institutions go that route. The initial cost is higher, but they scope it out over the course of 3, 4, 5 years, even 10 years. How much money they would save in the long run is, it's logarithmic, really. Um, to me, Apple products, from an IT standpoint, I'm in a unique situation because I was able to come in and kind of design this from the ground up. And coming into a brand new institution, I wouldn't do it any other way. Um, Having the Google Workspace, as our learning tool, and having Apple products. I mean, from a maintenance, security, reliability standpoint, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. And we use a tool called Mosel for our mobile device management, and they make it so simple. I'm coming from a Windows environment before, and I'm telling you, and I tell this to Edwin all the time. Time is the most precious commodity, especially in technology, right? What you can do to sort of automate, save time, will pay so much dividends later on. With the Apple products, it's resolvable very quickly. And if it's not, we have to reach out to Apple support for anything big, which we've had to do once or twice. But comparing it to being in a Windows environment when we were dealing with issues every single day, and not to knock it, it works for some people. But again, for us in this situation, coming in, bringing a brand new institution, and be able to scale for students, for employees and staff, Apple was the only way to go for us.
Yeah, and I also think about there's of course the productivity gains which didn't even show up in the IBM study from having the Apple, and I agree. I think that people are sometimes penny wise and pound foolish, right?
Right.
They say, oh well, they can get some SKU from some Microsoft vendor for $100 cheaper, a couple $100 cheaper, but they don't look at the long term implications and also the experience, right? The experience of our faculty and staff. I know that you recently did a user satisfaction with IT, and you had what was it, like 90% satisfaction rates, right? Which I've been in the medical school environment for a long time. I've been medical school educator for like 20 years. If I can get satisfaction rates above 50 at some medical schools, they're like throwing a pizza party, right? And to get 90% satisfaction, especially about IT, because that's usually a place of major frustration for a lot of folks. I think you're crushing it. And by the way, I'm also very proud. Talking about Apple, as far as I know, I think I'm the only medical school dean in America that is an Apple Distinguished Educator. 2013, Apple was kind enough to give me an Apple, make me an Apple Distinguished Educator.
I had to do it. That's a big flex.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm very proud of that.
I mean, hopefully we'll be there too. So 3 horns next time.
That's right.
Yeah. And I like what you said about Google Workspace too. I mean, I think Google Workspace has been an incredible product for us, and and I don't think most people know this, but if you actually look at productivity, people think that Microsoft 365 leads the market share, but last I looked, that actually over 50% of the market share for workspace productivity is actually Google Workspace, and I think it's best in class in terms of collaboration, and we use it every single day. I mean, every single document, we're sharing, we're collaborating, and it changes the workspace, and I've been at institutions before where you're trying to find some version of some document and stuff like that. That we don't really ever have to deal with that here
Right.
because we always have it up in the cloud. We can always access it from anywhere.
Yeah, and there's always that point that people that have been using Microsoft Office for years. We've had that with several faculty members that have come over, staff too, that are just used to Microsoft Office. The tools that we have available for these people in particular that come over and aren't sure about switching to Google Workspace, we have learning modules, we have guides, and within a week, I'm telling you, this is people that have transitioning from Office to Google Workspace, are picking up things so much faster. They're saying that they can do so much more with this. The reliability factor of Google Workspace, in an all cloud environment, is so much better than Microsoft Office, and that's from my personal experience. Yeah, Google Workspace for us has been fantastic.
And the security is so much better, right?
Better security, cloud environment. I mean, the built-in redundancies. I mean, in technology, the biggest thing is having the backups of the backups of the backups, and there's so many levels of security and protection built in with Google Workspace. Again, it's a no-brainer for us.
Yeah, yeah. And they also have some cool stuff too. I mean, I know that we're using Gemini a lot for their AI. That's and that's included in our Google Workspace, which is incredible. I was at a conference talking about AI last November. It was actually the ACOM Board of Deans, and they were talking about AI, and I said, well, let me check this out and upload a SOAP note, because SOAP notes are how physicians document, and for medical school faculty, that's usually like, at least for me, it was like one of the not my favorite job as a faculty member at a medical school is to grade
Yeah,
SOAP notes. I
yeah.
spent, much of my life grading SOAP notes, and it can be a tedious job. And I had on my hard drive some old SOAP notes that students had turned in from years back, and I uploaded them, and it came back like 1 second later, with a grade for the SOAP note and feedback on it. It was actually much better than I did. And in fact, I had missed stuff on my own, when I graded it, but the AI had actually picked it up. And then you can even upload rubrics, and it can actually grade based upon rubrics. So I think that's pretty cool technology. And I know that simulation is using that. Of course, you still have the physician faculty member overseeing that, the grading process, but it's a tool that they can use to help augment them and also take away some of the tediousness of some of those tasks, which, to me is, super cool use of AI technology. And I know they're doing a research study on it right now.
Oh yeah, yeah. The AI right now. So again, we're at a precipice in terms of AI and bringing it into education. So the technology is fantastic, but there is room for improvement, right? Um, Also, it's the mindset in the educational community. So, when you look at AI, you think people are not cheating, but using it to get an advantage over anybody else. But to me, like you mentioned before, when grading soapbox, um, it's best utilized as a tool, to help you to provide insight that you wouldn't otherwise have. Um, it's fantastic, and within the next 6 months to a year, it's going to be so much better than even it is now. You know, it's a fantastic, especially in medical education.
Yeah. And to me, I think technology shines when it's available, but it doesn't dominate everything, right?
Right.
And where it's just, it's there, it's that tool in the background that can do things. And I think from an aesthetic standpoint, we certainly have tried to do that, in the facility, here at OCOM. But I think also the mindset is that our technology supports what we do, but it doesn't dominate what we do. And it's like, the future of soap notes, for physician documentation. There are folks out there that have told me, why are you even teaching soap notes? Because in the future, it's just going to be some AI. There's going to be open microphone. You're going to walk in, and there's systems, and they're already even playing around with some of these things to, um, just to kind of document in the background, and you'll just automatically have, the note ready for you. And you just have to review. I don't think that we're quite at the point now where we're going to stop teaching that, and especially I think as a physician, if you're the one signing off on the note, I still think you have to have that level of expertise on the notes, the parts of the notes, how to create the notes, the inside of what should be in the note, to be able to effectively, edit the notes and sign off on the notes, created by the AI.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, by the time, I mean, the digital landscape in terms of AI is going to be so much different, even than from how it is now and how we're utilizing it
Yeah.
to when this class even graduates. It's
Yeah.
going to be completely different. And what you're mentioning, it seems far off, but it could be integrated into the learning space, a program that we use to, record these sessions. It could be, uh, vetted, implemented, and utilized in as soon as that time frame.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
100%. Yeah. I think, you know, well, we were talking about the Gemini for the AI technology, but there's also some other cool products. I know we talked a little bit about this, the Notebook LM. I've been playing around with that,
yeah,
which is pretty cool. You can actually upload like notes or whatever. Students can do it, and you press a button, it turns into a podcast,
yeah.
two people speaking. Which is to me just pretty baffling technology. One of our medical students, actually, it's our class president's using using AI to basically generate sample test questions for his colleagues and some sample notes and all these type of things. And it's amazing. Products that weren't even existed 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Now the students are actually making it part of their daily lives, and I think improving how they learn. Right.
Yeah. And I will do? I'll give some of that credit. In times of sort of war and widespread sickness, there's so much. The technology is boosted at an exponential rate, right? So to be honest, this boost in AI and virtual reality, augmented reality, I kind of give it to COVID.
Yeah.
When we have this sort of time period of forced technological advancement, you see that again in times of widespread war and sickness. Things like this happen. Um, obviously COVID was terrible, but we did come out with a lot of technological advances from it.
Right, right. Well, it's just like Zoom. I remember being on a Zoom 14 years ago, and I mean, I remember the time. This is great technology, and there was a organization that had kind of incorporated it, but I hardly ever used it. I mean, it would be something I would use so infrequently. The last medical school I started, I mean, it was rare to have a video Zoom call. And here, what we did here at OCOM, I'd say almost, some good portion of our setup, initial meetings were actually done by Zoom. In fact, we even had a remote workforce for the first year or so. And then nowadays, like every single day, I'm talking to hospitals and stuff, across the state, and things that in the past I would have to driven there to have some of those conversations, or you'd have a conference call, which wasn't nearly as good as actually seeing the people, their inflection, and I'll tell you, I'm so much more efficient and productive by being able to have the Zoom technology. I'd say probably 30 to 40% of my meetings each day are done by Zoom, and I love it. Now, there's nothing that replaces the in person,
Right.
but it's a great additional tool in our toolbox, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Zoom, our Zoom license comes with so much other tools in addition to the video conferencing. I mean, we have the room schedulers with it. We have the students use that to reserve their spaces. There's just so much that you can do with that. We just enabled the AI companion in Zoom, and once people start using that, they're going to get the summarized versions of their meetings in an email right after their calls. They'll have chapters in their meetings. It's a great tool
Yeah,
overall.
yeah. And I think we even talked about using it for show notes for here, just having
Yeah,
it, generate the show notes for this show, especially for those folks that, want to do it. And of course, you can turn stuff into articles, right? The ability to have a series of conversations with folks, um, and, record it through Zoom, and then, automatically you can basically come up with a textbook or something like that, from these conversations. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. Now, you mentioned, augmented reality and virtual reality. And, and virtual reality is another one of those technologies that has been kind of out there for a while. I'd say, at least 10, 15 years, people have been talking about it. And I remember, people get all excited. And then, of course, I go to some of these medical schools and I, walk around and they put, you're given the tour and right, they put you on the VR and you're like, oh, wow, this is
wow,
really,
immersive.
and then
Yeah,
I asked the student, like, you guys use this? Nah, that's really just for tours because
right.
it's, it kind of gets in the way and stuff
Showpiece.
like that. But now I think things are starting to change. And at least I feel that the VR is starting to take off. I mean, we're a partner for Elsevier on their anatomy product, and they have all sorts of simulation, and now, and of course, some of these VR folks are starting to incorporate haptic gloves so you can actually feel like if you're touching the virtual
Yeah,
patient and stuff like that. I know our students are using augmented reality on their iPads with a complete anatomy product, so they can actually put a cadaver anywhere, walk around with their iPad Air, and and they can go down the nerve, artery, and vein, and it's although of course we're completely virtual anatomy, and which is kind of 21st century medical education, and there's evidence that shows that you actually have at least as good outcome, if not better outcome. But you can also vertically integrate into the curriculum in a much better way because you don't have the shelf life of the cadavers. But I graduated in the year 2000, and some of my contemporaries will come in and they'll say, "Where are the dead people at?" It's kind of
yeah,
creepy almost,
right.
but I get it, right. Sometimes it's tough to embrace some of the technology and those type of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, as over the next couple of years, the technology is just going to be even better. I know we were talking a little bit about the Apple Vision Pro. Um, you know, it hasn't had that high of a success rate, and it's only because I think the initial cost of it is too high. Well, it's twofold actually. It's the initial cost, and it's the development behind the applications for the AVP. Now, if Apple were to work to lower the cost, to make it more widely available, and of course have the development of the apps, the AVP would be such a game changer in our specific instance. I mean, I'm sure there's other applications for it, but if we can have, a set of devices for every class in virtual anatomy, how immersive that experience would be with this tool, again, would pay so much dividends in the back end. And hopefully, they'll work on that to make it more accessible for us.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think it will. I mean, so I had the very first iPhone when it came out in 2007, right? I got it the day of, and I think I paid $800 for it under contract with the carrier, right? So the 2-year obligation for a carrier plus paying the $800, and of course nowadays you can go to any store and get an iPhone, much better than that original version for basically for free, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure it will continue to evolve and change. So I'm excited about that technology too. Now, we talked a little bit about frustration sometimes with users, using technology, and and that's always one of the things that I think sometimes we probably don't always talk about, right? The empathetic approach to folks using technology, right? Uh, I you know have over the years, people come and they're kind of grumpy about things, and I've actually kind of taken more of a physician approach when folks do have some challenges with technology. I mean, we talked about like the nurse mnemonic in medicine,
Yeah.
and actually I'm not sure if Edwin's heard me say this before. Have you heard me say this about the nurse mnemonic?
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. So in medicine, years ago, and this was probably about 12 years ago, I was actually an associate dean at another medical school 11 years ago, and this professor, we were supposed to be teaching this class the next day on empathy, And so she sent the faculty this article that was this new technology using what's called the nurse mnemonic for approaching patients empathetically. And so I read this nurse mnemonic. It's called the nurse mnemonic. I read it. I read the article, and it sounded pretty good. And basically, it's an acronym for the N stands for naming the emotion of the patient. And this is for folks that are upset or going through a lot. So you name their emotion. They're upset or whatever. U stands for understanding. You understand why they're upset or whatever. R stands for respecting. Who they are and how they feel that way, respecting them and their feelings and their situation. And S stands for supporting them, and E stands for expectations. And so of course I learned it the night before, right? Because it was a new thing. And the students the next day, I kind of taught it to them, and then they said, have you used this? I said, no, it's like this new thing. But I said, but I'm going to start using this. So literally like the next day in the hospital, I was doing a hospitalist shift in this hospital in rural North Carolina. And this ER doc says, hey, there's a patient in room, 12 that, he was dying of lung cancer and hemoptysis, bleeding, coughing out blood and stuff like that, and probably need to be intubated, put on mechanical ventilation, on the breathing machine. And, but it was stage 4 cancer. And so, his quality of life had really diminished, and he was cachectic, real skinny, and, really was, on a physical decline, and had a daughter who was very, very upset, with everything that's going on. And the ER physician was, recommending, like a hospice, palliative care, try to support the patient as opposed to, ICU and, and machines and all these things to, life support and all this other stuff. And she was very distraught. And he actually handed me the chart, and he was like, yeah, kind of good luck with this situation, because it was, because she was really so upset. And I don't think that interaction had ended quite as well as he wanted it to. And so I got the chart, and then, the nurse says, oh, I'm going to follow you in room 12. So she comes in, and, I think she was like, brought some popcorn with her to, see how I was going to handle this. So anyway, so I get in the room, and, so I took a history and physical, asked, what's going on, try to get the information, examine the patient. And then afterwards I was, talking to the daughter, and, you could tell she was very upset. And I said, and she was actually extremely upset, but they always say that you kind of go down a little bit on the emotion scale from where they are. So she was extremely upset. I said, it sounds, and I used I said, well, I'll use the nurse mnemonic, and I named the emotion. It sounds like you're upset. So I went down a little bit for de-escalation. And then I said, I understand what you're going through. I mean, if this was my father, I would feel, the same exact way, that he's, going through all this and dying. And then I went to the R, respect. I'm going to respect you, whatever your wishes are, based upon the situation, you and your father's wishes. And and then I went to the S, support you. I'm going to support you, whatever you decide to do. And we're going to make this happen. I'll be here for you. And then E is the expectations. Even before I got to the E, she said, well, doc, and of course, she's crying and everything. And she said, doc, what would you do if this was your father? And I said, I would probably focus on making him comfortable, giving him, try to preserve as much dignity, at this stage, and have him, focus on the comfort and the love at this point, at this stage in his disease process. And I probably wouldn't necessarily put him on, breathing machines or anything like that, and all the stuff. And I'd probably refer get the hospice and palliative care specialist to come in here and help out. And she said, we're going to do that. And so she actually hugged me when I was leaving the room and everything. So I go out to the, with the nurse, and she, she was like actually amazed. She didn't think that was going to end too well, that whole interaction. And she was like, how'd you do it? I said, well, you ever hear the nurse mnemonic? And so she went over to the paper towel rack and pulled one of those paper towel downs, and she wrote, okay, what does the N stand for? The U and everything. She wrote, so I have this idea that she like has this little paper towel in her pocket. And she like, pulls it out and everything once in a while. But it's funny. I told at a previous medical school, there was a an IT person that was there, and he was working with faculty and staff, and there was a particularly challenging interaction where somebody was really frustrated. And so I told him this whole story just like I did about the nurse mnemonic, and he said, "I'm going to start using it." He wrote it down on the whiteboard in his office. NUR and everything. And as far as I know, it's still there. I know he had it there for years, and he uses that when he interacts with patients or with faculty and staff. And he came back to me, said, it really is working. It's a very empathetic way of approaching, patients that, or faculty and staff that have frustrations with the technology. And I'll tell you, I use that in my own personal life. So Edwin and Shazam, that's my gift to you all today.
Thank you.
Next
I'll
time
write
someone,
it on a piece of paper, hold it close to my heart.
that's right. Next time someone has a problem with the printer, that's what I'll be doing.
I understand you can't print.
Yes, I'm very frustrated with that as well. You expect this to work, don't you? I'll make it work for you. No, that's actually a very powerful mnemonic. That's really nice, and I think that's actually interesting. IT needs to know more of that, because for people in our field, and I think Shazam can agree with me on that, more people who are more into tech kind of lose a little bit of the humanity side, just because they're just so immersed in anything tech related. Like sometimes you forget. Shazam is always on top of me about it. IT is, yes, it has to do with computers, but it also has to do with customer service. It has to do with being there for somebody. A lot of times for our classrooms, one of my responsibilities is making sure that these rooms run well, and there's technology in all those classrooms. We can do a whole nother podcast, just on that side. How we set up our classrooms in our auditoriums. But most of the time, the professors, they've gotten accustomed to how the technology works. So they come in, they turn on the Extron display, they plug in their laptop, they're ready to go. I necessarily don't even need to be there to help, but just being there is a way that IT supports. You know what I mean? And I think that's it's like practicing the nurse mnemonic before it even needs to be implemented. So I think that's really cool. And I like it that this department also emphasizes that as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you, ever since I learned that nurse mnemonic, I actually use it all the time in my personal life, and people around me, and obviously patient care and stuff like that too. It's it really is it does add the humanity to a lot of situations, and of course from a patient standpoint, a physician patient standpoint, the empathy, right? But I think if we can kind of make the world a little bit more empathetic place and try to understand people more, and communicate, and they call it functional empathy, I think we can make the world a better place. But I'll tell you, I've been to IT conferences and stuff. I can tell you, the human aspect is oftentimes missing, right? Because everything's about the technology, and they don't do it. And actually, that was one of those things. I went to the Apple Distinguished Educator. They had a conference back in 2013 in Austin. And and I remember them talking about the technology and liberal arts, and that was part of their DNA. The human aspect of it, right? Because at the end, that's what technology really means. The differences that we can make for folks and empower them to lead better lives and have better outcomes in what they do, right?
Yeah, so definitely, yeah. As an IT, we should definitely support in a human being the best human they can be, and that's what technology should be. Shouldn't replace anything. In terms of human connection, Yeah.
And I like what you said about the the classroom technology. You guys should do the OCOM IT podcast or whatever, right? You could, there's just limitless things to kind of talk about, not only what you guys are doing, but where the field's going. And heck, we haven't even talked about things like security, or at least we scratched the surface on things like that, and all these other things. But so many cool opportunities out there to talk about. And actually I had one of the board members for the American Medical Association, and you'll appreciate this. She was speaking yesterday. She was giving kind of a keynote to our medical students, and she's actually the first osteopathic physician that ever served on the board of trustees for the AMA. Because we have the American Osteopathic Association, American Medical Association, and before there wasn't as much interaction between the two groups, and now there's a lot more collaboration than ever, and very, very positive the interaction. But anyway, she was here talking with our medical students, and she brought she wanted to plug in her laptop and everything, so she's plugged in, and all of a sudden it worked, and the clicker worked and stuff like that. She said It's never like that. She was, we're talking about joking around. You go to some places and they're like, crawling under the thing, or you have to like, you know, have that person from IT call some help desk line and leave a message, and hopefully they call back before your presentation starts in 10 minutes. And I've had all the above personally, and just to have technology that just works. In the
Yeah, I
classroom.
mean that's the most important thing, to instill confidence in our end users. You know, Technology is at its best when you're not thinking about it. When you're not worried about coming into the room and connecting, when you're not worried if somebody's going to be there to help. That's when I think, our department technology and general support is at its best when you're not thinking about it at all as an end user.
Yeah, well said. Well, it reminds me, we recently got advanced copies of the Trust Transformation book by Dr. O'Meara Mansfield. She's the chief medical officer for one of the local Advent Health hospitals. Incredible person, and I think you were there, right,
Yeah.
Shazam? Anyway, and I wrote down, the quote, and I think it goes like this: that one definition of professionalism are behaviors that engender trust. And I think that's it with technology, right? If your technology is reliable, it's there, it's supportive. Of course, that's part of our professional approach to IT support at OCOM. But I think that builds the trust. It builds the trust in the team. It builds the trust in the technology, and it can enable people to go forward. And let's face it, that's part of the reason why I think people get so frustrated, because they don't trust the technology.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. It's like security too, right? I
Right.
mean, people need to feel secure with their use of technology, right? It's like that thing, and I know you and I were kind of joking around. We didn't have to. That whole CrowdStrike came out and stuff like that. We
Yeah.
were good, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would always bring that up in conversation when you were doing tours, and I'm like, oh, you heard about the whole CrowdStrike thing, and it would always come out with costs. I mean, it cost companies billions of dollars, depending on their size, and it was just a complete shutdown, complete just failure of technology over this application that is inherent on most Windows devices. You know, CrowdStrike is a good security tool, but it's one of the cheaper options, and companies tend to go with it. And I always bring up, who wasn't affected by the CrowdStrike outage? Us,
Right.
because we're an entirely, again, Google Workspace, um, Apple environment where those kind of zero-day threats just don't exist. Um, and again, with us, security was so important because of the size of our organization. And again, that's why we spent so much time designing the not only the physical infrastructure, but the digital landscape, for us to open and be good to go, but scope 10 years down the line to, yeah, to, ensure that we can not only scale up, but continue to be secure. Again, that's why the Google Workspace is so incredible, because there's so many features that are built into that, in addition to the Apple devices also.
Right. And of course, the technology has changed so much. I think Edwin mentioned something about printers, but like
Ugh,
for years,
printers.
people have,
Yeah.
technology, I go to some of these places and there's like a line out the technology door, and they're trying to get their printer set up,
Yeah.
or some .dll file, or some craziness going on. And really, I mean, it's changed, right? Some good portion of what you all do is really just teaching people how to use the technology. And so, the traditional, IT tech support, at least in our environment, it changes, right? You're
It's
not
changed. Yeah.
you're not sitting there trying to get their computer up and running. You're sitting there trying to enable them to be the most efficient and productive, and use the newest tools and things, right, in their lives.
Right. I mean, even in this environment, I mean, we're in a completely lectureless environment. It's a different scope. So I'm coming from a place where we had classes Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. The technology needs were much different than how we have it today. So students are here mainly for labs and exams, right, which is what we focus on for the technology for them. But in the lectureless environment, we have to focus on the remote aspect of giving students access to these uh, lectures, pre-recorded lectures that they can learn from in a functional manner. It's a totally different from in person. And in addition to that, the devices that they use, how they use the devices when they're here on campus, it's a completely digital, different landscape than what we've been used to. And I think we've learned a lot from this experience that students have been in here, and I think we're accommodating them very well.
Excellent.
Yeah, and something else that I think is like even more important is these students are using technology that they've been using for years by themselves. Everybody, so many people have iPads, so many people know how to use Apple devices and iPhones and everything. So for them to just go to a school and then we hand them a device that they're already familiar with, they go, "Oh, great. So I can focus on studying, I can focus on learning rather than how do I use this, this new device or this new program." It's pretty different, especially nowadays. I come from a generation where we grew up with the phone in our hands. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's really cool to see, how some students just get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'll
So
tell you what. I mean, over the last 10 years, I mean, what I've noticed, 95% of students have Apple devices.
Right.
MacBooks, MacBook Airs, iPads, phones, 100%. I mean, pretty most students have iPhones, so they know the environment. They can come slot in and just go. The learning curve is very minimal. Apple's been around, and that's why we kind of want to again emphasize that. Yeah,
Excellent.
and on that note, I mean, with the Apple iPads, we give the students the one-on-one iPads. We're also reassessing that. I mean, at other medical schools, the iPad is great for note taking, of course. You know, that sort of thing while you're in the classroom. But since we don't have lectures, we're looking to reassess how students are going to be using the devices that we give them. Whether an iPad will be the best thing for how they're going to be using it, or if a laptop like a MacBook Air gives them more screen real estate, gives them more functionality in their day-to-day stuff. So we're also reassessing that, to see what maybe next year might change. Maybe it won't be. Maybe the students like this and the iPad and they want to stick with it. So, which is definitely a possibility.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I could talk all day with you guys. It's always such a pleasure, and it's to me, coming down to I know I'm not supposed to call it the Genius Bar, but the Apple tech area, it's always the highlight of the day, and you guys are so fun to be around. But anyway, thanks for a great show, Shazam Muhammad, Edwin Gonzalez. Appreciate both of you. Thanks for being on the OCOM podcast, Modern Medical Education, and thank you for joining us today for the show. And please remember to like us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes.
yeah.
Yeah, such a pleasure to be on this. I'll definitely want to do it again, and I'll leave everybody watching this video with a piece of parting advice:
Yes.
restart your computer.
I love it. All right. Well, thanks again. Have a great day.